What's up, guys? Alright, let's start with the first workout. First workout is actually going to be leg day. As you can see here, I'm starting on the Stairmaster. Now, typically I'm not going to recommend starting with cardio to start your workouts, but I know for me, I struggle a little bit with having my hips a little tight, which makes doing deep squats tough. So I like to start with the Stairmaster to loosen things up. Now, as you can see here, I'm going one foot in front of the other, putting all the weight on the balls of my feet. That is actually putting all the tension on my quads, as opposed to any other part of my legs. So I like to stick to doing this for about a minute before switching to the other style right here. Now, as you can see here, I've actually switched to stepping on the outside of each step, and my toes are pointed outward, and I'm actually attempting to put all the weight on my heels. This is actually activating the glutes and a little bit of hip flexors as well. So I'm loosening everything up, getting the blood flowing, as well as priming all the muscles in my posterior chain. So I like to switch between these, doing about a minute of each, alternating back and forth for about 3 to 5 minutes. So that way it's not long enough to take away from the rest of my workout. Of course, our strength movement for leg day is going to be the squat. But before we hop right into it, I like to start with some pause squats with no weight, just like this, to help loosen everything up and get ready to do some nice deep squats. So let's go over form a little bit here. I want you to analyze my stance. This is the first point I want to make. Now notice my hips are below my knees. Now, I don't care what squat motion you are doing, this should happen on each and every rep, or else it's not a squat. No ifs, ands, or buts. That's the end all, be all. Next, my heels are firmly planted on the ground, and my spine is straight, and my chest is up. After pausing at the bottom for about 10 seconds, I like to pulse some air squats for about 10 reps before resting. I'll only do 2 rounds of these with about 20 seconds rest in between. It's just to help us get loosened up before we put some weight on. Alright, now let's take a look at my foot placement real quick before I dip down into the squat. You'll notice my heels are just about shoulder width apart, maybe a little bit wider, and more importantly, my toes are pointed out at an angle, and that angle is about a 45-degree angle. And the reason for this is because the direction my toes are pointed in is the direction my knees are going to bend in. Now, of course, my knees are going to be going outward, as in away from each other, because obviously my torso needs somewhere to go if the hips are going below the knees. Now, for those of you that are a little bit more advanced or a little bit more experienced in terms of powerlifting or squatting, obviously there's going to be a little bit of personal preference here in terms of the foot placement, and this will actually depend largely on your anatomical structure and your body type. Although I do still recommend starting with this type of foot placement first before you start messing around with any other type of stance. Alright, one final thing about form before we dive into these warm-up sets. I want to take a look at the squat from this side angle right here. Now, a few things I want you to take notice of. First off, as I start squatting down, it's my hips that shoot back first and start lowering before bending the knees. Now, think of the same style squat you would use if you were squatting down to sit on the toilet or a low chair. Quite frankly, a lot of people start bending the knees first. You need to think bend hips first. Hips go back, then the knees come down. Now, this next little piece of tidbit information, you're actually probably going to get some conflicting opinions on, depending on which coach or trainer you ask. Now, one thing I'd like you to notice from this side angle here is that when I come down, my knees do not go past my toes. It's my hips that are doing the majority of the bending, not my knees. Now, there's a reason for this. With this, there's more flexion on the glutes rather than the quads. The glutes are much bigger, stronger muscles, so you'll be able to generate more power this way. Also, if your knees are going far forward to where they're going past your toes, then you're actually hyperextending the joint slightly, and you're putting more strain on the joint. You're also putting more tension on the quads instead of the glutes. Now, there's plenty of people that go their entire lives squatting with the knees going past the toes, and they never have a single issue. So for those people, all the power to you. For everyone else, I highly recommend doing it this style. So not only are you creating a better environment for your knee, but you're actually also putting more tension on the glutes rather than the quads. We'll have plenty of opportunities to put tension on quads with other exercises. Now, before we dive into the rep ranges and the sets and all that kind of stuff here, I want you to take notice that I'm pulling the weights off from the rack, facing the rack, and then I back up to begin my set. I notice some people go the opposite way. They face outward from the rack so they can walk forward. I'm sure there's some reason that they think they should do it this way, like maybe there's a mirror behind them and they want to be able to do the set. But whatever the reasoning is not good enough. Now, the reason for that is once you finished a set and you're all tired or exhausted from doing the set, you don't want to back up and try and find the rack that you cannot see. It's way safer and way easier to just finish the set, walk forward, and then rack the weights since they're in front of you and you can see it. So that's the primary reason, but the secondary reason is actually you're just going to look like the biggest rookie in the gym if you're going the opposite way. So just trust me on this one. Now let's dive into the meat and potatoes. Before we get to our working sets, we're going to do some warm-up sets. So I like to do anywhere from 3 to 6 warm-up sets, depending on how I'm feeling that day. So I'm going to leave that up to you, depending on how you're feeling that day or how much you need to warm up before getting to your working sets. Now again, your working sets are the heavy sets that we're going to be doing for strength. In order to get there, though, we don't want to just hop in and start doing working sets with massive amounts of weight. What we want to do is start with doing some warm-up sets. Now, what I prefer to do is make these warm-up sets nowhere near failure. So basically, whatever weight you have on the bar, if you could do a maximum of 12 reps, only do 6 reps. We're only trying to activate our central nervous system, loosen up the muscles and joints, and get some blood flowing before getting to the heavy stuff. So this is going to be a little bit of personal preference on your part. However, I still recommend doing a minimum of 3, and each set is going to be progressively getting higher in weight. So for example, here, I'm actually going to be working up to 4 plates on each side. So I'll do a warm-up set with 1 plate on each side, then a warm-up plate with 2, and a warm-up plate with a warm-up set with 3 plates on each side. You get the idea. After we've done all of our warm-up sets, now we can get into the fun stuff, the strength movements. Now, I know in the intro video I talked about the strength movements being about 4 sets of 8. Here's the thing, though. We're going to try to add a little bit of weight each and every week, only if you can complete your 4 sets of 8. So let's say, for example, like right here, I'm doing 405 pounds. Let's say this week I do 4 sets of 8 and it goes rather smoothly. Awesome. Next week, I'm going to add those 2.5 pound plates on each side to add a total of 5 pounds. And then instead of going for 4 sets of 8, now I'm going for 4 sets of 4. Now, the reason for that is, of course, I've added a little bit of weight. And the week after that, I'm going to go for 4 sets of 6. And then the week after that, 4 sets of 8. Once I've mastered the 4 sets of 8 with a very particular lift, awesome. That's when you bump the weight again. We're doing this to guarantee that we never, ever plateau. We want to make sure that we can keep increasing the weights with our strength movement. That is the whole purpose of the strength movement. Remember, we're always focusing on increasing numbers, whether it's increasing the weight, increasing the reps, or increasing the sets. So this is one of the very few things where you should be recording what you accomplish each week. I don't care if you write it down in your phone or you write it down in a little notebook. Do what you got to do. Each and every week, we are going to be slowly increasing intensity. A quick side note, for those of you that are struggling with the depth or the mobility of doing a back squat correctly, I'd rather you started doing a front squat instead. The front squat will actually allow you to do the squat movement more correctly if you're struggling with the mobility. The reason for this, as you can see here, my buddy Lorenzo is demonstrating, the weight is actually in front of you rather than behind you. So this will make it easier for you to focus on keeping your chest up while dropping the hips down, rather than having the weight on your back, making it difficult because you might be falling forward. Now I want you to take notice that he is still dropping hips below knees and still keeping his back straight and still keeping the chest up. Now the bar is going to be resting right in front of the throat, basically resting on the clavicles. Something I like to tell new lifters is if you're doing a front squat and you feel like the bar is choking you, then you're doing it correctly. So I like to cross my arms the same way Lorenzo is right here to help provide a little bit of stability in terms of keeping the bar in the desired location. Here I'm going to be demonstrating the first giant set after doing your strength movements. The first exercise right here is going to be close stance squats with an elevated heel. Take note of the 5-pound plate that I've placed underneath both of my heels, and my heels are about 1 inch apart with my toes pointed outward, again just like the squats, so that way my knees bend in that direction. Also take note that I've placed the bar higher upon my back, so that way it's actually resting on my traps, still keeping the chest up. This type of movement is actually forcing all the tension onto my quads while still doing a squat-like motion. As is with any giant set, I immediately follow the first exercise with the next exercise, which here we have the split squat. It's basically a lunge, except I'm staying in the lunge position and forcing all the tension onto one leg continuously. So I'm going to hit all my reps on one leg before switching and changing stance, and then forcing all the tension onto the next leg. Take note that I am maintaining tempo, so that way we're doing continual tension on the desired muscle group, which here, as is with the lunge, just like the split squat, will be the glute. Now let's take a closer look at that form for the split squat. My buddy Lorenzo is going to be right here demonstrating. I want you to take note of a few things. First off, it's a very wide stance, and the reason for that is because the same principle applies here as it does for squats. Your front knee, so the front leg, should not go past the toes. The reason for this is that creates the primary hinge point to be the hips, placing more of the tension on the glute, which is the reason we're doing these movements right here. There's plenty of other times for us to direct tension on quads. Right here, we're trying to direct tension onto the glutes. Also, I want you to take note of how both feet are pointed straight forward. So right here, this is a great angle where you can see his knee does not go past the toe. The primary hinge point is the hip, and the back knee comes down to be almost touching the ground, but not quite. So it's almost an inch away from the ground. You want to hit that on every single rep. As is with most of our giant sets, I'm going to finish off with some ab exercises. Now, typically for this one, I'm probably going to be hitting hanging knee raises, but that's simply because most of these squat racks have a pull-up bar on it that I can do them. But, pick whichever ab exercise you prefer. Next giant set, we're going to start with the hack squat with a close stance, so that way we can place tension on the quads. Take notice here, I'm doing slow and controlled reps. So you see a nice slow negative and an explosive positive, so that way we keep constant tension on the quads. Also take note, my hips go below the knees on each and every rep. If you're not going at least to that depth, then the only person you're cheating is yourself. I promise you, you need to at at least reach that depth to reach a full eccentric and a full concentric on those quad muscles. Now take a quick note of the foot placement. Notice both feet are pointing straight forward, so that way my skeletal structure is actually in a straight line. And also the feet are only a couple inches apart. So you see when my knees hinge, they're only bending forward and then coming back up on each and every rep. Next, we have air squats. I'm going to slow these down for you a little bit so you can really absorb what I'm talking about. It's the same form as you would do as back squats, like you would when you have the weight on, but with no weight. But with these, we're actually going to call them repeaters. The reason being is I want you to take notice that I never come fully to the top to lock out. So I'm actually putting constant tension on my glutes because I'm staying down in the pocket. So what I mean by that is I'm not doing a full rep. I'm just doing continual tension down at the bottom half of the movement. And of course, finish each giant set with an ab exercise of your choosing, and then rest before hopping into the next set. All right, here's a bonus little exercise for you if you're feeling like you got a little extra time on your leg day. Now, don't mind this lady that seems to be hovering over me for some reason, so I'll just censor her face out of this. Now, I'm on the quad extension machine, but here's the thing. I'm going to be doing a quadruple drop set. So what that means is I'm going to be doing 4 back-to-back sets on this machine, but each one I'm going to be dropping the weight. So I'm going to start with the heaviest weight that I can handle for about 10 to 12 reps. Now I'm going to do my 10 to 12 reps. As soon as I'm done, I'm going to drop the weight about 20%. And then I'm immediately going to do another 10 to 12 reps. And I'm going to repeat that process 4 times. And the reason we're going to do this is going to fully exhaust the quad muscle because I'm going to be reaching failure each time and then just going to drop the weight so that way I can continue the set. And as is with every workout, let's finish with a little bit of conditioning. Pick whichever one you want, try to mix it up every time you do it, and worst case scenario, go ahead and just hit that Stairmaster for 10 to 15 minutes. I promise you that'll do the trick as well, although it won't burn as much as the conditioning will, but hey, make do with what you got.